Welcome to another edition of Around with Randall, your weekly podcast on making your nonprofit more effective for your community. And here is your host, the CEO and founder of Hallett Philanthropy, Randall Hallett.
I can't thank you enough for taking a few minutes of your time, especially this week, and joining me, Randall, on this edition of Around with Randall. As we release this particular podcast, it's Thanksgiving week, and each year that I have done the podcast, I've spent a few minutes talking about gratitude, in part because I truly believe it. I believe that gratitude has such a powerful effect on one's life, both mentally, physically, throw in emotionally, spiritually, that we tend to underestimate how important that is. Today, in my not quite tribute, but certainly connection to the ideas of Thanksgiving, is to spend a few minutes talking about maybe the top reasons or the top rationale people have for what they are thankful for. And then I want to talk for just a minute about my gratitude and my thanks that I have that I realized this past month. So the top 10, according to Greater Good Science Center at Berkeley, lists a whole bunch of different items that people tend to be really thankful for. First and foremost, which usually comes up at the top of the list, is health and physical well-being. I would also add into that, over the last several years, particularly with the pandemic, is a heightened understanding and appreciation for mental well-being as well. People tend to be appreciative for those things when they are present in their life. The second is supportive relationships. And I'm going to hold that to the very end and maybe spend just a few more minutes on that in terms of my own gratitude. Third is the opportunity for growth and learning. And again, these aren't in any particular order other than just things that are tended to be listed. I have believed in lifelong learning as long as I've been breathing on this earth. May not have understood it as a kid, but I, in third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh grades, would naturally matriculate to wanting to learn, absorb information. And even to this day, I'm constantly reading and challenging myself and listening to podcasts and others about how I can find growth. And I hope you're doing the same. And in the same vein, which we'll come back to in a few minutes, that's what this podcast is really all about. It's what consulting to me is really all about. Number 4 is the natural surroundings and environment. I've said this before, probably on a couple of occasions. I'm an Omaha kid. There's no place I'd rather be than here with my family in Omaha, Nebraska. But if I was to look at the environment and the natural surroundings, there's always been a special place in my heart for the Rocky Mountains, particularly the Front Range, particularly Rocky Mountain National Park. I find such peace when I think about my times that I've had the privilege of being there and experiencing that grandeur that comes from just being in nature in that particular place. You probably have some place that's important to you. Naturally, gratitude comes when you probably are in that particular or in places like that. Number 5 is freedom and autonomy. I think we take this one for granted. In this last month, we voted. There are lots of different perspectives on the election, and I'm not going to get into the political. But I am going to say that I sometimes think that we take for granted the freedom that comes with our vote. My dad, as you may have heard on previous podcasts, was a legitimate war hero. Decorated, silver stars, bronze stars, Purple Hearts. He saved the lives of the men under his command. What's interesting is that he didn't ask to go overseas to fight in that particular war. He was told to, and he did so because he believed in the idea of freedom. And although that particular war in Vietnam may not have been as central to, as according to many historians, to our freedom in the United States, there are those like my grandparents who went and fought in World War II or World War I, or even going back all the way back into the Revolutionary War. People have chosen to submit their lives, put them on the line for the ability for all of us to go vote. That freedom is not true everywhere. We take for granted much of the time that we have this unbelievable gift that has come by being born into this country and or being related to someone, parents, who were born into this country, or you become a citizen of this country. We probably should take that a little less for granted and be grateful for it. Access to basic needs and comforts. I've talked about, and or maybe an episode about 38 or 39, there is a podcast around with Randall about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I talk about it an awful lot. I think it's really important and really what that this is. Maslow talks about the hierarchy of needs, that we have some baseline things in levels 1, 2, and 3. We can't even get to self confidence or self esteem, self actualization, those levels 4 and 5, until you satisfy basic needs: food, love, shelter, protection, safety. We also sometimes take those for granted and probably should be more aware of them. Moments of joy and beauty. I think I've become a much better aware person on these when it comes to my kids. And they're the simple things when they laugh and they smile and they're having a good time. That illuminates for me the ability for awareness when it comes to that. Number 8 is financial stability. There's a study from Princeton in 2010 that's been repeated in different ways, but it was really the first that indicated that in terms of income, this is 2010, so it's going to be elevated with inflation, but that if you make $75,000 or more in 2010, probably closer to 85 or 90. Now, in the average part of the United States, so average cost of living, that that brings some level of happiness, and that above that level, there's only incremental increases in happiness, which tells you money doesn't buy happiness. But having a baseline not being alleviated from the total picture, but you have enough to live, to function, that that number is important. Many people think that it's critical for them to think about that monetary level as a way that they can bring more happiness into their life. Memories and past experiences. I think that this is important as I get older. I think about the things early in my life that were very prominent and very important to me now. And then finally is a sense of purpose and meaning. Who am I? What am I trying to accomplish? I'm asked all the time, when I'm introduced to speak or other things, they talk about my educational experiences, my professional experiences, things of that nature. And I tell people, I'm very honest, that's what I do. Who I am is, for me, I'm a son, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a brother. And that's that purpose and meaning, at least for me, that I find that brings great value. I skipped over one because I want to spend just a moment or two, and we're going to go shorter this particular time. Not a lot of tactics, maybe give you something to think about just a little bit. Is this idea of supporting relationships. There is no question that my life begins and ends each day with what happens in my bedroom. And I don't mean that physically, I mean that a sense of calmness and peace that comes every morning and every night when I crawl into bed with my wife. That's really not what I want to talk about here. Earlier this month, I had the privilege of attending the International Conference for the Association for Healthcare for Philanthropy. And at that conference, I have a booth, very standard, normal things. Some amazing things began to happen that I had not quite understood or maybe even contemplated. The number of people that came up to me at my booth and commented on one of three things: that they had listened to the podcast once or many times, that they had read the book, and or that they had heard me speak in various either webinars or in person, and the value that that had for them professionally and or personally. I was absolutely blown away. I was at times kind of taken aback. Not because of any of the quality of the work that I produce, not because of anything that maybe I've said or done, but I've always believed that my greatest calling professionally was to help one person. Early on in my life, I wasn't sure who that person was. And as I'm almost 30 years into this, I'm not sure I know who it is now. But it wasn't to help a lot of people. It wasn't to elevate my name into lights. It wasn't to make a big impact on the greater good. It was to help one person who wasn't in my family. That was always my career goal. And as people came up to me and thanked me for what I have done, for what I have contributed, for what I am doing, I realized that maybe it's more than just one. And so my Thanksgiving and the idea of gratitude centers around trust and faith, those relationships. And this time, it's not trust and faith in others, but that I am privileged, privileged that some one person or maybe a couple have faith and trust in me. That was more than I ever aspired to. I see this now in various ways. I had a couple weeks to think about it. The trust and faith that my clients provide me, some of whom I've had the absolute pleasure and privilege of serving. And I view my consultancy that way. I'm serving them. Some of them are for almost a decade now. So they must believe that maybe I have something to offer, which is humbling. I think about the people that I don't even know, that conference. People that came up and said, I listen, and they could name a podcast. I just stood there in awe and thought, I just ramble on for 20 minutes each week, probably a lot like today. And yet people thought it had value. One person came up and indicated that the book changed the way in which they view their entire leadership model when it comes to healthcare and how they engage their CEO. And I thought, wow, is that a low bar if you're using my book as that standard? All of those are moments that I really took in, not because of wanting to elevate them, or I'm not putting them on LinkedIn. I'm not, but I want to capture those moments as a way of realizing what kind of gratitude I should have and need to have, and realize that it's important for people who have faith and trust in me professionally. Another that came out of this was the realization that the unbelievable joy that I have, even though the sorrow that surrounds it, is the last 18 months with my mother. I've always had a tremendous relationship with my mother, deep, meaningful relationship. But when dad passed, being 6 blocks away, not that it's any more or less than my amazing and talented sisters, but I've had a chance to develop an individual relationship with my mother, and that she trusts me. She asks my opinion on things, most of which I think she's beyond capable of handling. But she believes I have something to offer her. When that role switches from child to guidance, there is a sense of gratification that comes. And I always tell her when she says, "You're so helpful." I'm like, "Mom, I was brought up by the best. I don't know any other way of doing it." That's great gratitude that someone who you've looked up to your whole life turns around and asks your opinion about some pretty important things. I would also say that my children, which is kind of interesting because I have a very fervent belief of parenting that I share with my beautiful wife, that we promote the idea of democracy. We don't practice it. We're not voting as to what the kids want. They're 11 and 8. They're going to do what they're told. As they get older, though, they have more opinions, and they should. There is a interesting dynamic that occurs because you want them to be safe and have the right inputs to be successful, but they have the ability to begin to have their own opinions. It's interesting, just as a sidelight, that the opinions come a lot earlier with the girls than with the boys. My 11-year-old son and my 8-year-old daughter are about in the same place when it comes to their own opinions, even though they're 3 years apart. Girls are a lot more engaged. This is all to say that there's this give and take when it comes to power and trust. How much power do I have over them versus how much do I trust them to experience their own life? And more importantly, the gratitude that I have is that trust piece is what they have in me as a dad. Do they trust that I have their best interest at heart? Do they trust that I love them? These are things that don't have any tangible evidence, which young people need. They live by the world in which they believe in, the world in which they can see and touch. But yet, my children seem to think that I might have something to offer them. And it's probably smart not to take that for granted and be grateful for it. The last is probably the most profound, and I tend to talk about her more than she probably realizes, is the unbelievable gratitude I have for my wife. Not for bearing children, although that's an amazing experience in itself. Not for, anything that we do physically, but for the faith she puts in me. She's still here. She believes we're better, as do I, as a group, a couple, an entity, than we are isolated and independent. The one. That adding the two parts together is so much more than the individual parts that come with them. When you find that kind of connection, it's hard to describe the peace that comes every day when you know that there is a center point in your life. And I'm grateful that she trusts me. I'm grateful that she believes I have something to offer, that she's willing to listen and put up with my hyperbole, and that at the end of the day, when it's all said and done at 10, 11 o'clock, usually a little bit later for me, is that I look upon her and think, my day was better because she was a part of it. And it was better because she trusted me to be a part of hers. I am appreciative this Thanksgiving, more so than most, in terms of realization, in the trust and faith people have put in me, which does two things. Number one, makes me shake my head and wonder, are you all crazy? But also at the same time, makes me realize how blessed I am. And that's what Thanksgiving really should all be about. And I'm hopeful today, as you listen to this drivel, that it gives you a chance to think about the things you're appreciative of. What do you value? What are you trying to accomplish? Who do you need to thank? Who do you need to realize has made an impact? Because at the end of the day, those are the things that are most important. It's not the destination that makes any difference. It's the journey along the way, and most importantly, the people that are a part of it. Let me say how appreciative I am for you, for the time you spend either this edition or any edition with Around with Randall. And I wish you the very best of actually my co-favorite holiday, along with Easter, Thanksgiving. I wish you and yours the very best, and I hope you find a little opportunity to review the thought process of what gratitude you have for those in your world. We'll see you the next time right back here on the next edition of Around with Randall. And don't forget, make it a great Thanksgiving Day.